Leo, the week of August 3rd to August 8th, 2026, brings a quieter, more reflective energy after last week's rare personal high point. Chiron stations retrograde on August 3rd at 0 degrees Taurus, settling into your 10th house of career and public standing, opening a real period of introspection about your professional reputation. On August 6th, the Sun forms a supportive trine to Saturn, connecting your own sign to your 9th house of beliefs and travel a genuinely favorable, grounding aspect. The same day, Venus enters Libra, her own ruling sign, landing in your 3rd house of communication. This week reads as a natural come down from the intensity of the Sun-Jupiter conjunction and full moon last week. And that's genuinely by design. A big personal peak is usually followed by a quieter stretch that asks you to actually integrate what happened, rather than chase another high immediately. There's real value in this kind of week, even though it lacks the drama of the last one. Not every meaningful transit needs to announce itself loudly to matter. Let's go through what all of this actually means for your money, your relationships, and your energy, using the real sky, not generic guesswork. Money and career carry real introspective weight this week. Since Chiron's retrograde station lands directly in your 10th house of career and public standing, Chiron represents a wound that never fully closes, but can be worked with consciously. And having it stationed here, right after last week's Sun-Jupiter high point in your own sign, asks a pointed question. Was the recognition you received last week genuinely earned and internalized? Or does some part of you still doubt whether you deserve the visibility you got? This is a good week to sit honestly with that question rather than either dismissing it or spiraling into it. Leo often builds an entire public identity around being seen and admired, which can make any private doubt about deserving that admiration feel especially uncomfortable to look at directly. Chiron's station here is specifically inviting that look, gently rather than harshly. Over the months this retrograde continues rather than demanding an answer by the weekend. Mars in Gemini, meanwhile, sits in your 11th house of friends and long-term goals, giving you real decisive energy for group projects or collective plans, a good week to push a shared goal forward, rather than letting it stay vague among your circle. If you've been the one generating enthusiasm for a group plan without anyone actually committing to next steps, this week's Mars placement supports being the one who finally pins down a date or a concrete action. Early in the week, while the moon moves through earlier signs before Chiron's theme fully settles in, use the calmer opening days to notice your own honest reaction to how last week's attention felt, rather than immediately moving on to the next thing that could earn you similar recognition. Relationships benefit this week from Venus's move into Libra on August 6th, landing in your 3rd house of communication. This placement genuinely eases how conversations flow with people close to you, favoring diplomacy and fair, balanced exchange over the more dramatic, larger-than-life communication style you sometimes default to. If there's been friction in a relationship recently, this is a good week to actually talk it through calmly rather than making a bigger gesture out of it. Leo's instinct under stress can be to grand gesture a problem away rather than sit through the more mundane, unglamorous work of an honest conversation, and Venus in Libra specifically rewards the latter this week, even when the grander gesture would feel more natural to reach for. This extends beyond romance to siblings, neighbors, and casual daily interactions all benefit from Venus's smoothing influence here. So a small overdue conversation with someone in your immediate circle is worth having while the ease is genuinely available, rather than waiting for a more dramatic occasion that may not arrive on its own. Mars in your 11th house continues to support directness with friends and groups. If a collective plan needs a decisive push, you have the nerve for it this week. This combination of Venus's diplomatic ease and Mars's group-oriented drive is a genuinely good pairing for resolving a friend group dynamic that's felt slightly stuck. since you can push for a decision without it coming across as forceful or self-centered, which is exactly the balance this particular week supports. If you're single, Venus in your third house also favors meeting someone through everyday conversation rather than a grand romantic setup, a neighbor, a classmate, someone you interact with regularly but haven't looked at romantically yet, might genuinely be worth a second look this week. Energy and health this week benefit genuinely from the Sun's trine to Saturn on August 6th, connecting your own sign to your ninth house of beliefs, travel, and higher learning. This is a supportive, grounding aspect that favors disciplined effort towards something bigger, a course, a trip, a belief you want to actually commit to rather than simply admire from a distance. Use this specific day for structured progress on a longer-term goal. Since Saturn's steadying influence and your own sign's natural vitality are cooperating rather than competing, a combination that doesn't happen often for you and is worth using deliberately rather than letting pass by unused. Leo's usual energy runs on inspiration and immediate momentum, which is genuinely powerful but doesn't always sustain a longer project past its exciting first phase. Saturn's involvement here specifically supports the less exciting, more consistent follow-through that turns an inspired idea into something real over time. If you've started something recently under the burst of confidence from last week's Sun-Jupiter conjunction, this trine offers the structural support to actually keep it going, rather than letting the initial enthusiasm fade on its own. Physically, this is also a favorable day for actually scheduling something health-related you've been putting off, a checkup, a routine you've meant to establish. Since Saturn's discipline paired with the Sun's vitality makes follow-through genuinely easier than it usually is, there's a shorter note about the broader picture still unfolding. The lunar nodes remain on the Aquarius-Leo axis, with the North Node in your 7th house of partnerships and the South Node in your own sign. Your growth edge over the coming months continues to lie in genuine partnership and mutual consideration, rather than the more familiar, well-practiced pull toward self-focus that came to such a strong peak last week with the Sun-Jupiter conjunction. It's worth noticing the contrast directly. Last week handed you a legitimate, well-earned personal spotlight, and this week's quieter energy, along with the ongoing nodal theme, is asking whether that spotlight left room for anyone standing beside you, or simply illuminated you alone. That question isn't a criticism of last week's joy, it's simply the next honest step after any genuine high point. And Leo tends to skip that step more often than other signs, moving straight to the next moment of shine instead. This week doesn't bring a new nodal event, but it continues shaping the background of everything else happening right now. And the come down from last week's intensity is a genuinely good moment to check in on that question honestly. So here's where this actually leaves you, Leo, heading into the second week of August. Chiron is asking you to sit honestly with whether last week's recognition actually landed internally. Venus in Libra eases communication with people close to you, and Saturn's trine to the Sun rewards real, structured commitment to something bigger than yourself. If there's a single thread connecting all three, it's the difference between a peak experienced alone and one genuinely shared. And this week's quieter pace gives you the actual room to notice which one last week turned out to be. If this reading resonated with you, hit like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments how last week's Sun-Jupiter energy is settling for you now that the initial excitement has passed.